Why do so many new products fail in the marketplace?
The company has not taken into account carefully, not only with respect to the product or service, but also with respect to price.
Ultimately, the customer pays a price. So, how can companies find out which service improvements to incorporate?
We ask them, tell me 3 things that you think you can improve about this service. It is easy to get this data when people are traveling from one station to the other because they have nothing else to do.
Why is it that these companies have been able to get consumers to choose their products and services consistently?
I think it has to do with the fact that over time they have established a reputation, and then as you say, network effects also dominate, and then now it becomes an automatic choice for the people in terms of going to that company.
Suppose there's a new product with an unknown brand name. There it might be difficult to consider the brand name.
What's the disadvantage that I go into this market compared to an established brand name?
They want to add features to their products, so to differentiate themselves from their competitors. How can they know how much a particular feature is worth to a customer or the marketplace?
It's a great question. If the market willingness to pay is greater than the incremental unit cost of providing that feature, then you will make more money. And if it is the other way around, then you will actually lose money.
Welcome to the Leadership Unplugged podcast. It gives me great pleasure today to have, Professor Seenu Srinivasan from, he's a professor emeritus at the Stanford Business School, Stanford University, and he's a legendary professor of marketing. He has come up along with a person, Professor Paul Green. He's come up with a technique called Conjoint analysis that has been used extensively, widely by so many companies, researchers, and so on. So, welcome, sir. Thank you very much for coming on our podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So, let's start off with, you've been studying new product development, new product launch for so many years, many decades now. So why do so many new products fail in the marketplace? Can you throw some light on it from your years of experience of teaching, research, and consulting?
Yeah. So, a main reason, at least I would say, of new products failing has something to do with the fact that the company has not taken into account carefully customer preferences. I mean that not only with respect to the product or service, but also with respect to price.
With respect to price. Can you give some examples of maybe new products that have failed because you think, you may not have the evidence, but how these new products fail because maybe some customer preferences were not taken into account?
Yeah, typically many companies, particularly this happens even more with durable products and technology products, they are more technology driven as opposed to customer driven. And they feel, and somewhat correctly, but not always, that we are driving the market, so to speak. So, there is definitely cases where that is the case, but in many cases of consumer products, both CPG goods as well as durable products, they have generally not taken into account preferences, is what I understand. So sometimes it is because there is a competitor in the market and they want to get into the market quickly, and that kind of thing happens, and so they have not studied things carefully on the front end. And the another reason why it happens is that they tend to choose price at the very end after doing everything else, as opposed to considering it earlier on. My own thinking as well as empirical evidence suggests it is better to take into account price very early in the process, because after all, you cannot find out how a customer is likely to respond to a product unless you offer the product along with its price.
Correct. Yeah.
So you can't just go on the basis of technology or whatever, and then at the end, what is the cost, and let me add some percentage to it.
Yeah.
That kind of thinking is problematic.
Yeah, because ultimately the customer pays a price.
Exactly.
Right? And whether a product is accepted or not, I think largely depends on the price behind the product.
Absolutely, and this is even more true in India.
Even more true in India, where you think that price sensitivity is higher.
Yes.
Right, compared to other parts of the world.
That's right.
So you suggest that companies, when they make new products, they ought to be thinking about the price as well, right? What the market can take.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? What the market can take.
Yes.
It's a great point. Right? Yeah. And so let's say I'm an entrepreneur, let's say I'm an entrepreneur. I want to make a new product. So how do I think about product specifications? And how do I, you worked in conjoint analysis extensively. So how do I think about how consumers make trade-offs between product attributes when they choose a particular product or service?
Okay, let me give an example, concrete example. And this is an example in which I am intimately involved because I was a consultant on this particular project. So this was for a medical device maker. So this company makes medical devices.
In America?
In America, right?
Yeah, okay.
And I don't want to disclose
Yeah,
the
that's
name
fine,
because,
that's fine, yeah.
but it is a medical devices
that's
company. And what they, let's say I get sick, I go to a doctor, and the doctor usually orders a blood test for me. If I go to a clinic or a hospital, then usually there is a lab in that place itself.
Yeah.
And so the blood test is done, the results come back to the doctor. If I wait a few hours or something, or maybe 1 hour even, I may get the result back to the doctor, and the doctor will find out, based on those results, what is the diagnosis and what may be a treatment that may be appropriate for him. This company, one of the segments they were considering is that of solo doctors. So these are people who are practicing on their own, or maybe a small group practice.
Okay.
Only like 2 or 3 doctors
Yes,
working,
yeah,
for
I
example,
understand,
together. As you can imagine, usually you can't have a lab attached to a solo doctor because it is just too expensive
Yeah.
to operate it. So their idea, and that came from the initial qualitative discussions with doctors. This is generally true, even though we have product specifications by Conjoint. I'll go into that in some detail. But earlier on, the main customer insight itself often comes from the talking to customers directly one-on-one or in a focus group type of discussion. So in this case, by talking to individual doctors or solo people practicing in like only 2 or 3 doctors, they found out it will make a big difference in their work if in fact somehow the blood test can be done in their premises itself, just like in the case of a hospital or a clinic. And so their idea was, we will come up with a blood serum analyzer,
Okay.
which will be a small, like a refrigerator or that kind of a size, which will be just adjacent to the doctor's office,
Okay.
where a technician can do some of the blood tests. Of course, this is not anywhere extensively that you could do
Yes,
in
yeah.
a regular lab,
Yeah.
but some of those tests you can do,
So some basic tests maybe.
basic tests.
Okay.
So that was the idea. Now, there are a number of issues that come up. So you have the main insight that you want to develop a product like that. But the product will succeed or fail, and this goes back to our earlier question about taking into account customer preference
Price,
as
yeah.
well. It depends on whether you have got your product specification right. Let me give an example again in this context. So it could be a very basic machine which can test only like 5 blood tests, or it could be a more advanced machine which can test maybe 15 of those. The 15 includes the 5, but then 10 other ones. So that's one attribute, or as we call it, one specification. A second one could be, if I develop this machine, can a technician do, what kind of training does a technician have to go through? Is it just 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days, for example? As you can imagine, if the machine is going to be more complicated, you have to do a lot more training compared to if it is a very simple one. And in terms of pricing, they had already decided what we should do is to have a leasing cost per year. That is, we don't sell the equipment because it will be too expensive, and also the doctor's downside risk is less if you do it on a licensing basis. So there will be a annual licensing cost, which can be, let us say, $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000, and an operating cost, so to speak, every time you do a test. There are some
Yes,
materials
yeah.
involved, and there is a time involved for the technician. So it may be as low as $2 per test, $3 per test, or $4 per test. So this already introduces to what conjoint analysis is. The term conjoint analysis was coined, as you correctly said, by me and Professor Paul Green of University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School. And the idea is you can think of any product or service as a combination of attributes. So in this example that I gave you, so it is the number of tests it can do, the number of days that a technician needs to be trained before the person can do it, the annual cost, the leasing cost, as well as the per operating cost of every test, how much does it cost, this kind of thing. And you can imagine if the product is specified in terms of these things at some level, the product may be more appealing to a doctor or a small group practice compared to something else. And the other thing we have learned in marketing, you very well know this already, that there is tremendous amount of heterogeneity among doctors.
True.
So even if you take solo doctors, some solo doctors will behave in a particular way in terms of their preferences compared to some other doctors. So what we did is a large sample of solo doctors as well as group practices and tried to find out systematically as to how they consider these 4 aspects. In fact, there are more aspects, but I'm simplifying.
Okay.
And what can we somehow quantify it? So the term that we use in conjoint analysis is attributes. Those 4 examples I gave you as attributes, and we call levels of attributes. So, for example, price, the annual price may be $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 is levels of that attribute. In this example, there are 4 attributes, and each of them have 3 levels. And so if you think of all possible combinations, that is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, there are 81 possible combinations. Right. To ask a doctor to evaluate each one of those 81 combinations is too difficult. Yeah. So we have come up with methods, I won't go into the technical details, of making it simpler. So the question that we will ask a doctor, for example, is that here is one possible, we would have introduced them first to the idea of a blood serum analyzer in their own office. Usually these are done with a video, so that they get a sense of what it is. You don't have to have a real product because it could be a mock-up type of product which doesn't really work, but you get an idea of what it is. So you have one possible blood serum analyzer, which is, let us say, it can do 10 tests. It takes 2 days to do. It costs only $5,000 per year and costs $6 per test. That's a possible option. So there is another option which may be different combinations of these things, and we will ask the doctor, suppose you have the possibility of choosing this blood serum analyzer or the second one, which one of these would you choose? Or would you say that both of them are not acceptable to you?
Okay.
In other words, that you will not buy, if these were the only options available in the market, I will not buy any of them. So what we do is to give the doctor, these are usually done on a computer, so a number of such scenarios, so let's say 10 or 12 scenarios like this. It may be just 2 options, or sometimes we have 3 options, and then the 4th option is none of the above. That is, if these are the only 3 options available, I will not buy any of them.
Okay.
Then using mathematical techniques, some of which I developed a long time ago, we can actually estimate utility functions for each of these attributes. So for example, what is the utility for 5 tests the machine can do, or 10 tests it can make 15. By the way, we can interpolate between them. That is, in other words, if you want to know what it is for 7 tests, it's somewhere between 5 and 10, approximately 2/5 of the way, that kind of thing we can do. So we estimate these utility functions for each of the doctors or group practices that we have. And in the case of a group practice, you will typically interview the person who is in charge of finance in the thing, because there are financial implications of this. By the way, doctors, this is an additional source of money for them. It's not only the fees that you pay to the patient, the patient pays, but you are charging something for each test, and your cost is less than that, so you are making additional revenue.
That is true of any service. They make money through mostly ancillary services as well. That's
exactly. So this is a thing that was partly the reason why they divided the pricing into both the leasing cost,
as well
annual
as
leasing cost.
Per test cost. Right?
That's a per test cost. So we estimated these utility functions, on the basis of which we found out something really interesting. There are really 2 segments in this market. One which wants a very simple machine, because the cost they cannot afford too much, and there are some who are willing to take sort of the more advanced ones. So eventually, based on this data, they came up with a product line of sort of a cheaper but less possibilities in terms of the number of tests, and a more advanced one, and it turned out to be a very successful entry for this. So that's an example where, even though the main insight comes from qualitative market research, the quantitative market research, this Conjoint
validates it.
Validates it, and it also gets you the product specifications, for example.
And did you segment the doctor? You said there is heterogeneity among the doctor community. So did you segment the doctors a priori and conduct separate analyses for both the segments, or how did you?
We normally, in conjoint analysis, at least, we go the other way. That is, we have the utility function of each one of the people, and then we analyze them using a statistical technique known as cluster analysis.
That's what
we find the segments. What we find, if you go with the a priori, for example, you could have a priori segments in terms of solo doctors versus group practices, for example. We find there is difference, but it masks a lot of the difference within each one of these groups.
Okay.
And so that's the reason. So even in solo doctors, there are some doctors who want the advanced machine and some want the, maybe it has something to do with their particular practice.
Okay. And since this is in healthcare, are there some regulatory concerns that you had to address?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, any of these things that are marketed eventually have to be approved by FDA, I think in this case, Food and Drug Administration.
Right.
Yes, it was approved. So there's a lot of other things that go on, but I am focusing on
mainly on the
consumer side of it.
Okay. Great. So excellent example.
Yeah,
right?
thank
Very
you.
insightful.
Thank you.
Very insightful, right? And it's always great when you learn something and you apply it in practice, right? So,
Indeed. This is certainly true of me. Some of the techniques I have actually developed in conjoint analysis came explicitly because I analyzed that I did some practical work. For example, in some of the practical work, consulting work, we found out that more attributes need to be included. And so you have to come up with sort of different approaches to handle more attributes.
Yeah. Because sometimes it becomes very complicated when you add many attributes. Like I've read that case of Marriott.
Yes.
This by Paul Green and where they had so many attributes.
Yeah. That's very difficult.
And it was very difficult.
Yeah, that's right.
Finding out the right combination, the part words.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Absolutely.
A lot of time.
Yes.
Time,
and it is also very difficult for the consumer to provide data in that case.
Yes.
Because it's just overwhelming. So you have to somehow take a large problem and break it down to smaller
into components.
So that the person can answer those questions easily. Yes.
True. Great, sir. Now let's go to service.
Yeah.
I mean, service is critical nowadays, right? Because if you look at product differentiation, it's not that high. What you can make, I can make, and vice versa. That's what is happening today. And so maybe service sometimes can be the differentiator. So companies are trying to, improve their services, right? So how can companies find out, which service improvements to incorporate, keeping in mind the costs involved, right, such that customer satisfaction is maximized.
Yeah, thank you. So the first thing we talked about in terms of product specification, that applies to service specification too. That is, when you initially introduce a service, you can sort of design various parameters of that service also that way. But coming back to your exact question. So let me give another example, again from my own practical experience, and this was done in India. So this is with Indian Railways, which of course all of us have experience with. It's a lot of fun, particularly when you're a young person in India, to get on the train. And in those days, it used to be steam trains in my case, but a lot of fun. So I'll take a specific example, but this applies across the Indian Railways and applies to other modes of transportation as well. So in the case of, let me take a specific example of Chennai to Bangalore, for example, second AC train. And so there is a service that is being offered by Indian Railways, and a lot of people are traveling between these two. And how can you improve this service, to answer your question, cost effectively?
Yes.
Is a question. And it also, this example dovetails nicely with the earlier comment that you made with respect to the larger number of attributes too. So you will see how this goes. So initially, again, we did a qualitative market research. This is something I have learned in market research, that you have to start with qualitative research, because otherwise, in the quantitative stuff, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So you have to get the parameters right.
Instantly, in my class yesterday, this is precisely the point I was mentioning.
I see.
First do the qualitative, then do the survey. Right?
Yeah, indeed.
Sorry.
That's right. No, exactly right. So what we did in this case is we asked 100 people traveling between Chennai and Bangalore, or Bangalore to Chennai, and we asked them a simple question. Hey, you just completed this. This is towards the end of the trip. As they are approaching the destination, about the final half hour or whatever, we asked them, tell me 3 things that you think you can improve about this service.
Okay.
And this is a very easy question to answer. It is completely free form.
Yeah.
So we don't tell them what to say or anything. And one other thing interesting which you will find is that it is easy to get this data when people are traveling from one station to the other
Yes.
because they have nothing else to do.
Yes. Yeah.
So
true.
it's actually, they are kind of interested because somebody is asking them their opinion and they have time on their hands,
Yeah,
so they
true.
can in fact answer this question. So we asked this question to 100 people, and then we tabulated the answers in terms of what are the
The mode.
improvements
Okay.
that at least 3 people out of the 100 mentioned.
Okay.
Because there are something just one person mentioned,
Yeah,
there is no
that-
reason to
yes,
take them into
yeah.
account. And we had a list of about 20 possible improvements. These are things like a cleaner bathroom, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
or better food quality.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Or they said, maybe magazines and so on can be provided.
Newspapers. Yeah.
Wi-Fi can be better.
Okay.
Things like that. Lots of questions like this. So we came up with 20 things, which is based on at least 3 people out of these 100 mentioned. So now we move to the quantitative phase, and I'm trying to find out of those 20 things that we have already listed, how much is the value a passenger attaches to each one of those 20 improvements. So this is, as you can imagine, a difficult question. First of all, goes back to the larger number of attributes. You can't give 120 profile, another 20 profile.
Yeah,
It is very difficult. And a simple way many market research is done is that you list those 20 things and ask them how valuable is it on a 5-point scale, for example. Extremely valuable to not at all valuable. The problem with asking the question that way is that people mostly tend to say everything is valuable.
Yeah.
So you don't get much discrimination.
True.
And we have done empirical studies to show that, in fact, you lose a lot of valuable information.
True.
And the predictability is worse.
Because when you see each question, everything, each attribute in isolation,
Yeah.
every attribute seems important. Right?
Exactly.
That's what could be happening here.
Exactly.
So you have to make consumers make trade-offs among the attributes.
Right.
Right.
So what we did in the quantitative phase, this was with about 225 people, again traveling between Chennai and Bangalore. We asked them initially to take these 20 improvements, put a check mark on the 10 things that you think are more valuable to you. By definition, the remaining 10 are less valuable. Okay. Again, the answers are different across people.
Yes.
So these are data are collected for each person separately, again on a computer administered.
How many? What's the sample size for this phase?
Sample size is 225.
225.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we asked them initially to say what are the 10 things out of the 20 which are more valuable. And by definition, the remaining 10 are less valuable. Then we take each one of these groups of 10, let's say the top group and the bottom group, and you take the top group and then sort them from the most valuable to the least valuable. And the same thing you do with the smaller group, the other group too, so that at the end of that exercise, you have a ranking from the most valuable to the least valuable of those 20 options.
Okay.
Okay, so I have got a rank order. In other words, at least I know which is more, which is less. But that doesn't quite answer the question of how much is the value of this versus that.
Because the data are ordinal. You need
Right.
like interval data, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We want more accurate, more quantitative or metric.
Yes, you want metric data.
Information. So the way I think again now the question is how to ask this question in such a way it is easy for the respondent to answer. So we said we'll take only 2 at a time. This is a method that a former doctoral student of mine by name Woded Netzer and I developed. He's a professor now at Columbia University. So we developed a method called ACE-MAP. And so this method basically what it does is that now that I have a rank order of those 20 things from the most valuable to the least valuable for this particular passenger, I will ask you to compare the top one with the 10th one, that is the 10th most valuable. I'll ask you to compare the 10th valuable with the last one, the 20th valuable, the least valuable. And I will also ask you to compare the top one with the bottom one.
Okay.
And we always ask redundant questions because it gives us a way of assessing whether the person is being consistent
correct.
and how much attention they are paying to the task itself. So that at the end of the day, if you find that the data quality is poor, then such people will not be included in the final analysis. So we ask questions like this, and then now, if I have 20 things, and if I'm going to ask only 2 at a time, the question goes like this. Let's say, for example, cleaner bathrooms is one attribute, one improvement. Another one is faster trains. And then in front of you, there are 2 bars in a computer, 2 bars, and each of them are at 50-50. That is at the same length, each of these bars are. If you click on what you think is a more valuable, the respondent clicks on that and then drags that bar to the right, the other bar pulls itself to the left.
I
So that the total constant sum as you
yes,
call
constant
it.
sum,
It's
yeah.
always adds up to 100. So if you pull this to 70, the other one becomes 30, which is telling me that this is approximately twice or a little bit more
And
valuable.
the respondents would be able to see those numbers. Right?
Right, they will see the numbers, they also see the length of the bar. So there are some people who are more visually oriented,
correct, and some who are more numerically
quantitatively
yes,
oriented. Yeah, so it accommodates both. And then the tricky question is, if I have 20 things, you can take 2 at a time. There are 190 possibilities, lots of them.
Yeah.
But the power of this technique and the power of the computer is to how to intelligently ask these questions, so that once I know your answers to the previous questions, I can ask the next question, the most intelligent question I can ask you.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, I won't go into the details of this, but this is called adaptive. So because the answers are adapted to the previous answers you have given.
Yeah, sure.
And then you can analyze those data by something called log linear multiple regression.
Mm-hmm.
And using that, we can quantify the values that each of these respondents attaches, passenger attaches to those 20 things. So we can get quantitative values.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like, twice, and this is 3 times as valuable, that kind of thing. The numbers add up to 100%. That is as if you divide 100 among those 20 things by using this paired comparison data. It turns out we have to ask only about 10 or 12 paired comparisons. You don't need to ask the 100.
Okay.
Right. So it can be done in a reasonable amount of time. The job is easier for the respondent because they are at any one time considering only 2 things. So we get that data. So that gives us one side of the picture, which is what is the value of making these improvements in a service.
Right.
There is another side of the picture which has to do with the cost that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So we went to the railways officials.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So there were in this case about only 12 or 15 railways officials. And we asked a question which is similar to the first one, but the question is different in the following way. Instead of asking how valuable it is, we asked them how costly is it to implement each one of these improvements.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the 10 costliest improvements and the less costlier improvements, 10, you rank them and then you do these paired comparisons in terms of cost now. This is twice as costly, subjectively, twice as costly as that. And again, from that side, we get the cost of making each of these 20 improvements. And if you have the value of making the improvements on the passenger side and the cost of making improvements on the railway side, you can take the ratio of those 2 things. What is the value divided by cost? In US, there is an expression called bang for the buck.
Yeah.
How much bang? We just went through Diwali. So it's how much bang do you get for the buck is the kind of question. So you sort these 20 things in terms of the most valuable for the dollar that you spend to the least valuable for the money that you spend, that kind of thing. And then you are able to assess something about, these may be the 4 most valuable things from a benefit cost point of view.
Benefit,
So this example illustrates making improvements to your service, but it also handles the question of larger number of attributes.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So excellent. Excellent. Yeah, and you have used this in products also somewhere?
We have. It can be done with products. So that's a good point, because let's say I have my engineers come up with 10 possible improvements to my product.
Yeah.
And so the question is then, what is the value of these improvements and cost data? You can do that definitely. Yeah, this has been done in that context as well.
Great. Very, very insightful example.
Thank you.
And now I think the railways also has, used those findings.
Yes.
And now we have other trains like Vande Bharat and
which is faster.
Just faster, and now they're experimenting with the tracks. I think are an issue, but they will they will work on that, and soon I think the speeds will match those in China. Hopefully.
So that's interesting what you just said, because I think faster trains was one of the more valuable ones they asked, but then at that time at least they felt the cost was just too high.
Yeah.
So, but maybe if they make enough innovation in that.
Maybe now there are technological breakthroughs that have lowered the cost possibly, right?
Yes.
Lowered the cost. Great. So that is an excellent,
Thank
very
you.
insightful. And now if you look at consumer choice, because Conjoint is all about how consumers make choices, how they make trade-offs. We find that some products, consistently consumers choose over time.
Yeah.
Consistently consumers choose over time. For example, we all use WhatsApp, for example. Facebook.
We don't even consider the alternatives.
Yeah. Though now Zoho is trying to come up with some alternatives, but still, We all use or WhatsApp, or even in more, WhatsApp of course is free, but even where, there's a cost attached, right? Maruti, for example, consistently does well, Titan, for example.
Yeah.
So why is it that, consumers are, why is it that these companies have been able to get consumers to choose their products and services consistently, while other companies have not been as successful?
Yeah. So customer preference along attributes is one thing.
Yeah.
But in addition, there is a brand name.
Yes.
And the brand establishes a reputation, often in terms of sort of subjective attributes, in terms of quality. WhatsApp, for example, in terms of, is it able to reliably convey the information, the quality of the voice or the quality of the picture is good, etc. So you establish a
reputation.
reputation.
In case of WhatsApp also, maybe some network effects also.
Yes,
everybody
absolutely.
uses WhatsApp, so
Absolutely.
it's difficult to not use WhatsApp, I think.
If more people are on WhatsApp, then it's more valuable for
the
me to be on.
utility it rises for each consumer.
So you're absolutely right. So first of all, a couple of things I should say. Brand name is often an attribute in conjoint analysis.
Okay.
So it need not be a quantitative attribute. It could be a qualitative attribute like brand name. So brand name A, B, or C. So one of the things we will also assess is what's the value to the brand name holding other things constant through conjoint itself. There could be attributes like color and so on. That's not in the WhatsApp matter, but such things can also be there. So to answer your question, the earlier question, I think it has to do with the fact that over time they have established a reputation, this thing, and then as you say, network effects also dominate, and then now it becomes an automatic choice for the people in terms of going to that company. So sometimes they don't consider. So there is also a question of consideration, whether somebody will even consider your product.
Yeah, true.
So a lot of the initial advertising, etc., that you do has something to do with that.
Okay.
So I should be very careful to say that all the 4 P's of marketing are absolutely relevant, absolutely important. So it's not only the product or service and price, but also the level of advertising that you do to get people initially to adopt the product and also to maintain their loyalty towards your thing. And in some products, like consumer products, distribution is also extremely important. So the other 2 P's are important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. Yeah, and when you said brand name, there you can consider for established brand names, but suppose there's a new product with an unknown brand name. There it might be difficult to consider the brand name.
Yeah, so we do include some unknown brand names often in conjoint studies.
Okay.
And that is for 2 reasons. One is to sort of see what is, you may have some option with respect to using this brand name or that brand name, and at least some of them are more suggestive of the product compared to the other. So we are able to assess that using that approach. And the other reason for doing it is to know what's the disadvantage that I go into this market compared to an established brand name. Mm-hmm. So it advantage. But what we try to normally do is to say what is likely to be the market acceptance of the product at the end of a first year of introduction, for example. Mm-hmm. So we can't say what will happen 10 years from now, etc., but at least at the end. So any of this kind of market research that you initially do is done in such a way to try to simulate, so to speak, because to get a person's full level of awareness to a product, it takes some time.
It takes some time.
Or repetitions of the advertisement, etc. So we have to worry about those things.
Mm-hmm. And now AI has come about, Gen AI. So is it affecting the way Conjoint will be done, or,
Yeah. So what has happened, I think, is that some of the early steps of doing the conjoint have been made much simpler, because you can go into a chat GPT like scenario and then say that I want to study this. It may even come up with a list of attributes, but I strongly suggest that you don't use only those and do some qualitative market research upfront. So the early part of doing the research itself is easier. The main problem with AI, in my mind, and maybe this will be changed over time, is that the heterogeneity it is not able to capture well. So you are able to tell what the market on average may try to do, but as I pointed out in some of my earlier examples,
there are segments.
Yeah, there are segments, and you don't get a good sense of the segments from the AI itself. If you assign the segments like solo doctors versus, then you may be able to find it. But so that, I think, is a limitation of AI at this point.
But maybe with time it will get better.
Yeah,
And,
it may get
time
better.
will get better.
It may get better.
Yeah. And you have some specialized software to do all this, or it can be
Yeah,
done in
so
standard software?
there is a company, I'm not putting a plug for this company,
Yeah.
but there is a company called Sawtooth
Yes,
Software,
yeah.
which has got, I don't have any stocks or anything on that thing. So anyway, they have a series of software that you use. But the one that I talked about earlier for the
AceMap?
train example is
the-
AceMap is a software that is distributed by somebody else, not by Sawtooth Software. But we can, one can find out about it too.
Nice, interesting. So nowadays, companies, it's very competitive. So brands and managers, they want to add features to their products, so to differentiate themselves from their competitors, right? So how can they do this? How can they know how much a particular feature is worth to a customer or the marketplace?
Yeah. So great question. So what's the market, in other words, willing to pay
Yes, yeah.
for this new feature that you have added?
True.
And if it is in an R&D kind of context where you can develop feature A, B, or C, D, you can then compare the market willingness to pay across those four and then choose one or two which are the best ones there. And again, you have to take cost into account as we did in the train
case of service.
context.
Yeah.
So let me give another example. This is also an example from my own experience. And I don't do typically too much expert witness work, but this example is an expert witness in the context of a legal case.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting. It's not sort of typical marketing, but very much marketing is important in answering the question. So this was a study. This was what happened was we all have smartphones, and we get notifications of these smartphones. So the question is always, what happened was there was a company called Simple Air. And this company had come up with an invention by which these notifications can be sent to users much more effectively, much more efficiently. In other words, there was an earlier technology, and the value of this new technology is that if you use this new technology, you can still send the notification, but your battery, the consumer's cell phone's battery, will last longer.
I see.
So that is what I won't go into the technology itself, but that's the value of the new technology. So this is Simple Air had taken a couple of patents on this one, and so they had the rights with respect to this invention. It turns out the Google Android operating system uses this new technology,
I see.
but they had not paid any licensing fees to Simple Air
I
for
see.
doing this. So Simple Air first approached them and said, "Listen, you are using what we have as patents, and you need to pay some licensing fees for it." They said, no, we developed this ourselves, and so there's no need to pay. So they took them to court.
I see.
And said, okay, let's let a court decide. In this case, it's a jury trial. In U.S., often these are jury trials. There are two phases to the jury trial. One is about whether there is a patent violation, actually, infringement. Number two, if there is an infringement, how much is the market willing to pay for this new invention they had come up with? So in other words, what is the value to the customer about this improving the battery life by whatever number? The amount of improvement is actually varies across customers because some of them have only like a smaller number of apps on their smartphone. Some others have many more apps in their on their phone. So that was the question, and I was called in because of my work in Conjoint analysis. Hey, can you please answer this question? Do an empirical study. So we did with, I think, a pretty large sample, maybe in this case, maybe 1,000 consumers in the U.S. in
And
this
who
case.
funded that?
This is by Simple Air.
Simple Air funded.
So I am obviously working for Simple Air in this case. But arguably, I'm an expert, and I'm supposed to give impartial answers to this. There is a court system which will try to work on this, so to speak. You will see this in a minute. So I did a study. So in this case, you don't want to directly ask the consumer as to how much is the willingness to pay for 2 more hours of battery life. People either overstate the answer to this question. We know that directly asking the question, you don't get the right answer.
True.
So you have to catch them, so to speak, with their guards down. So in other words, you ask, so we talk about smartphone in terms of, say, 8 different features. This could be the camera, it could be the brand name, it could be the memory on the thing. Its battery life is one of them. So we did a conjoint study, somewhat like my first example in terms of attributes and levels. And so at the end of the day, you get the value the customer is attaching, how much more utility he or she gets from the battery life improvement. But we also have price as one of the attributes, so we also know how much is the disutility of paying a higher amount of price. So we can put the two things together, it turns out, to find out what the market is willing to pay. So we actually calculated that on average for this market, they are willing to pay $12 more for the improvement in battery life they would get on average across consumers. And then you take the total number of Google Android operating system, which is a huge number. Right. So we calculated that for the period where the infringement took place, that $85 million is what Google owes to Simple Air. And a jury, the way this thing works, it goes back to your question about who funded the study. So everybody understands that there is some incentive at least to...
there's some potential conflict.
Right. So what happens often in these cases is there is your attorney and your attorney, my attorney, so there is jury of 12 people or something sitting on the thing, and he is asking me step by step, what did I do in my study, how did I get the answer of the $12, etc. And then he steps away and the opposite attorney comes into the picture. And their only objective is to tear it down. Is to tear me down, right? So the point is, and one thing interesting for academic versus real world, academics, we always try to get 90% of the answer right. There, the opposing attorney is only interested in the 10%. Right? That's what they're trying. So they went through and asked me lots of difficult questions and all of that. The jury heard that too. At the end, they decided that this evidence was compelling to them. And so they awarded $85 million to Simple Air based on the expert testimony and then all the evidence, all the other things. They had already decided that the patent was infringed.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's only a question of damages. So that is what the study was about. This could be done, as I said, if a company is thinking of 4 possible improvements, 4 different features, you can prioritize based on what is the market willingness to pay and compare it to the cost of making the improvement. So it turns out actually we have a research paper on this with another doctoral student by name Eli Ofek, who is a professor at Harvard now. And it also it has an interesting result, namely if the market willingness to pay is greater than the incremental unit cost of providing that feature, then you will make more money. That is, the company will make more money. And if it is the other way around, then you will actually lose money. Okay. So you have a way of comparing the market willingness to pay to the cost of making the improvement. So that's an example of quantifying the value.
Yeah, because so your message is that companies have to do this a priori, right? Not add the features, go to the market, find out, burn their fingers, then find out that market is not willing to
valuing it as much. Sometimes you have to do it because of competitive reasons.
Yes.
But otherwise, I totally agree with you.
Otherwise, you have to do it a priori so that, you don't burn your fingers, learn the hard way, so to speak.
That's right.
Very insightful, sir.
Thank you so much.
I think we had an amazing talk and, it's your experience comes through. It is not just because you have used all these things in different scenarios. Conjoint and its sister correlates, I would say.
Yeah. So it's something like 30 to 40,000 commercial applications take place all over the world every year. So this is a great source of satisfaction for me. Of course, I'm not the only person in this field. The early itself, there are, as I said, Paul Green and Richard Johnson is another one. So we all contributed in a big way.
In a big way. So I'm very happy. And because all these examples are from your experience.
Yes.
Right? And so that is why I think they are, that much more useful and insightful.
Thank you.
So thank you, Professor Seenu. It's a wonderful talking to you, wonderful meeting you again. Right.
My pleasure meeting you again, and thank you.
Thank you.